Okay, let's talk about a mission that was, by every single measure, a complete and total failure. A ship lost, a goal never reached. And yet, it's gone down in history as one of the greatest triumphs of leadership and survival the world has ever seen. So, how is that even possible? Imagine hearing those words. That was the grim, honest truth from a crewman stranded at the very bottom of the world. Their ship, their only connection to everything they knew, had just been crushed to pieces by ice. No radio, no contact, and, it seemed, no hope.
I mean, it sounds completely impossible. And to really understand the miracle of how they all got out of this alive, we've got to go back to the beginning, to the incredibly audacious, almost crazy dream that brought them to the most hostile place on the entire planet.
Yeah, their story really kicks off with this impossible dream. We're talking about the year 1914, right in the middle of what they called the heroic age of Antarctic exploration, a time when conquering the planet's last unknown frontiers, well, that was the ultimate prize. And the man with this dream? Sir Ernest Shackleton. He'd been to the Antarctic before, and he was absolutely obsessed with claiming what he saw as the very last great prize of exploration, the first ever land crossing of the entire continent. He put together a hand-picked crew of 27 men, and the plan was to walk 2,900 kilometers across the ice. No GPS, no high-tech gear, just sled dogs and their own unbelievable grit to get them through. But here's the thing. Before they even reached the continent, they got a really dire warning. At their last port of call, hardened, experienced whalers, guys who knew these waters better than anyone, told Shackleton that the ice was the worst they'd seen in their entire lives. They begged him to wait. But Shackleton, he felt the pressure of the whole expedition, and he made a fateful decision to push on anyway. And that fateful decision, well, it had consequences, almost immediately. Shackleton's ambitious dream was about to turn into a frozen, inescapable nightmare. By January 1915, their ship, the Endurance, was stuck, just trapped. What was supposed to be a quick trip through the ice turned into a months-long prison. The ice held them in its grip, and for 9 agonizing months, they just drifted, totally helpless. By October, the pressure was just too much, and the ship's huge wooden timbers began to groan, and then crack and splinter. Shackleton gave the order, abandon ship. And then, in November, they all just stood there and watched as their only home, their only link to the outside world, was literally crushed and then swallowed by the ice. You know, the only reason we can even see what this looked like is because of the expedition's photographer, a guy named Frank Hurley. He knew he was witnessing history. So as the ship was going down, he actually dove into the freezing, debris-filled water to rescue his heavy glass photographic plates. He had to leave hundreds behind, but the 150 he saved, they're our only window into that incredible world. So, with the ship gone, the grand mission to cross the continent was completely over. The new mission was brutally simple: survive. The situation was, well, it was beyond grim. You've got 28 men literally marooned on a floating piece of ice, hundreds of kilometers from the nearest land. Their food was running out, there was this constant threat that their icy raft could just break apart right under their feet, and maybe worst of all was the crushing mental weight of being totally, completely isolated from the rest of the human race. 497 days. Let that sink in. That's how long they survived, adrift on the ice. That is almost a year and a half, living on a frozen, unstable raft, before they would finally set foot on solid ground again. Reaching land was this moment of just immense relief. But here's the crucial thing. It only traded one impossible situation for another. Elephant Island was this desolate, remote rock. Nobody was coming to rescue them because nobody in the entire world even knew they were alive, let alone where they were. So Shackleton had to make a life or death choice. The closest options meant sailing right into the teeth of the infamous Furious 50s, some of the most powerful violent winds on the entire planet. The furthest option, though, South Georgia, was a staggering 1,300 kilometers away. But, and this is the key, it would let them sail with those powerful currents and winds, not against them. He chose the long shot. And this one incredible decision, it led to what is now considered, pretty much universally, the most daring and astonishing small boat journey in all of maritime history. The plan itself had 3 seemingly impossible steps.
First, Shackleton and 5 of his best men would take a tiny 7-meter lifeboat and try to sail 1,300 kilometers across the most dangerous ocean in the world. Second, if they somehow survived waves that could be over 12 meters high, they had to land on a tiny island and reach the whaling station. And third, they had to find a ship and come all the way back to rescue the others. It was more than a long shot. It was basically a prayer.
But their ordeal wasn't over. Not even close. After 16 brutal days at sea, they were so exhausted and beaten up that they landed on the wrong side of the island. The whaling station they needed to get to was on the other side of this treacherous, unmapped mountain range. So Shackleton and 2 others, with nothing but boots wrapped in screws for grip, set out to do what no human had ever done before: cross it on foot. Meanwhile, back on Elephant Island, the 22 men they left behind were fighting their own battle, a battle against total despair. Shackleton's second-in-command, a guy named Frank Wild, was an absolute rock. To keep hope alive, he started this daily ritual, telling the men this simple phrase every single morning, for months and months. And you know what? On August 30th, 1916, after 3 of his previous rescue attempts were beaten back by impossible ice, Shackleton finally broke through. As his ship appeared on the horizon, the men on that island saw that their boss had kept his promise. He had come back for them. And here it is, the most incredible number in this entire story. Despite the ship sinking, the starvation, the frostbite, the despair, every single one of the 28 crew members was rescued alive. It's an absolute miracle of leadership and sheer human resilience. And believe it or not, the story doesn't even end there. In this incredible modern final chapter, an expedition in 2022 finally located the lost ship. More than 100 years after it sank, the Endurance was found sitting upright on the seafloor, almost perfectly preserved by the freezing waters. It's like a ghost ship, connecting this historic saga directly to our world today. Which brings us right back to that question from the beginning. The expedition failed. They never achieved their goal. They never crossed the continent. But by refusing to lose a single man in the face of literally impossible odds, did Shackleton actually achieve a victory that was far greater than the one he originally set out for? What do you think really defines the success?